75 years ago today, World War II ended in Europe. VE Day, victory over Nazi Germany after more than 5 years of war and millions of people dead. President Harry Truman made the announcement, and the day has been honored in memory ever since.
General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
President Harry Truman announced the end of the war in Europe, and the people of America and Europe celebrated that victory together.
I believe that there was, in the hearts of all the fighters, all of the people that were in uniform in Europe on that day, I believe there was a genuine desire for peace, and the hope that there would be no more war.
I do not believe that the tide of history is on the side of despotism. I do not believe that the tide of history necessarily is on either side. It is only what we decide ourselves we will do, which direction we will turn the tide of history, that we can be successful.
We still live in an uncertain world. Men have not yet stopped war. Freedom, as always, demands courage and unyielding vigilance, and occasionally the life of man.
40 years ago today, the guns were stilled and peace began. 500,000 New Yorkers flooded Times Square and laughed and posed for the cameras. And by this day 40 years ago, over 40 million lay dead. And to this day we wonder, how did this happen? How did civilization take such a terrible turn?
During the war's final weeks, America's fighting forces thundered across Europe, liberating small villages and great cities from a long nightmare. Many witnessed an outpouring of love and gratitude they would remember for the rest of their lives. Less than a month in office, President Truman addressed the nation and said,
"This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day."
I do not know when victory will come. I do know that it will come.
That piece originally aired on NBC News 15 years ago. And joining us now, historian Rick Atkinson. He's the author of numerous best-selling historical books, including The Guns at Last Light, The War in Western Europe, 1944 to 1945. And thank you so much for being on today. I'd like to start by just asking you how our world today is defined by victory in Europe.
Good morning. Thanks for remembering the day. Well, the world today is a world that was shaped by World War II generally. Our national dialogue on racial and gender equality comes directly out of our national experience in World War II. Many of the institutions that we put in place after the end of the war in 1945, including the United Nations, NATO, the World Health Organization a couple of years after that, all intended to preserve stability and to ensure never again that we would never have the kind of catastrophe in which 60 million people are killed. So I think you can say that even 75 years later, the consequences of World War II are very much with us.
Hey, Rick, it's Willie Geist. Great to have you on this important day, May the 8th, 1945. Hard to believe that was only 11 months after D-Day. That's how quickly America moved through Europe. Why do you think it's important to mark this day as we are right here? And do you think a moment of unity like we saw in Times Square in those images would be possible today?
Well, thanks, Willie. I think that it's important to remember, in part because of the 16.1 million Americans who were in uniform in World War II, fewer than 400,000 are still alive. It's important to remember that their sacrifice gave us the world of peace and prosperity that has mostly endured for 75 years. One veteran once said that no war is really over until the last veteran dies. And we're coming to the point where World War II is really over by that standard. Is that kind of national unity possible again? You like to think so. It's hard to imagine in the divided world that we've got today, the divided country that we've got today. But I think that it showed us that when we all pull the boat in the same direction, we're all rowing in the same direction, that extraordinary things are possible. That was a country then of 130 million people, 16.1 million of them in uniform. Everyone had someone they loved in harm's way. Everyone had skin in the game. And until we feel that same way about our world in the 21st century, I think it's going to be difficult to replicate precisely that kind of sense of national unity.
Since this pandemic is being viewed as a war, Rick, and you talk about if everyone rows in the same direction, extraordinary things could happen. Are we rowing in the same direction right now as we face this human catastrophe that many parallel to a war?
Well, it's hard to imagine that we are. It doesn't feel like we're rowing in the same direction. I mean, one thing that we certainly saw in World War II, and there were many mistakes made, there were failures of leadership up and down the line, but we saw ultimately a sense, first of all, of the importance of alliance. Winston Churchill said the only thing worse than fighting with allies is fighting without them. And you have a feeling today that the alliances that were set up after World War II have frayed. They seem very brittle. You also have the sense that the strong national leadership that was essential to success, VE Day and then VJ Day several months later, victory over Japan, which marked the end of the war. The leadership that we got from Franklin Roosevelt, the leadership then from Harry Truman at the very end of the war, is something I personally don't feel today out of the White House. And until we get that kind of strong, constant national leadership, it's going to be difficult, I think, for us to really feel that we are taking the fight against this current enemy together.
Oh. His author and historian Rick Atkinson, thank you very, very much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.